The ghost of Earth followed us into the void. It wasn't a memory, not for my generation. It was a scar we were born with, a phantom limb that ached with the cold of deep space. We called ourselves the Diaspora, a name that tasted of ash and exile, the scattered embers of a fire that had consumed our world 2 centuries ago. The Crane, our reapers, had seen to that. They came not as conquerors, but as exterminators, their silver ships descending like locusts to strip our planet bare, leaving behind a scorched, silent sphere of black glass and poisoned oceans. We, the few who escaped on hastily built arcs and stolen freighters, were the leftovers. We were the grudge. My name is Elias Thorne, and I am a whisper diver. My ship, the Stray Dog, is less a vessel and more a collection of parts that haven't yet realized they belong to different wrecks. We hunt the echoes of old battles, the graveyards where the bones of our dead and theirs lie tangled in the silent scream of vacuum. We dive into the static and the radiation, looking for scraps of technology, fragments of lost data, anything that can give the fleet an edge in a war that has never ended. Our current quarry was the Seraphim Clutch, a nebula that glowed a bruised purple, the final resting place of the Third Fleet after the Battle of Whispering Gorge 80 years prior. Command believed the flagship, the Archangel, had been carrying a prototype of a resonance codex, a data core that could potentially crack the Crane's hive mind communication network. It was a ghost story, a legend told by old veterans to give rookies a flicker of hope, but Command was desperate, and desperation made them believe in ghosts. My crew was small, Deity, just the way I liked it. Lena was my pilot, a woman whose hands moved over the control yoke with the grace of a musician, her knuckles scarred from a childhood spent in the bare-knuckle fighting pits of the orbital station Erebus. She was young, her eyes still holding a spark of something I had long since lost, a belief that we were fighting for a future, not just clawing our way back from the past. Then there was Corbin, my engineer. He was a creature of the engine room, a pale, sinewy man who spoke more to the Stray Dog's reactor core than he did to people. He saw the universe as a series of systems, most of them broken. He kept us flying with scavenged parts, profane curses, and a genius that bordered on insanity. He'd been a boy during the siege of Xylos, and the things he'd seen had burned the optimism out of him, leaving only a cold, hard pragmatism. As we slipped into the outer veils of the Seraphim Clutch, the ship began to protest. The hull groaned, a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the deck plates. Spectral light from the nebula painted the bridge in shifting hues of lavender and indigo, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the recycled air. "She doesn't like this." "Elias," Corbin's voice crackled over the comm, tinny and laced with static. "The radiation is eating at the outer relays. It's like trying to swim through acid. Keep her together." "Corbin," I said, my eyes fixed on the view screen. The nebula was beautiful, a celestial tombstone of breathtaking scale. But its beauty was a lie. It was a soup of hard radiation, shattered asteroids, and the frozen, silent hulks of starships. Just get us to the Archangel's last known coordinates. Lena's fingers danced across her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. The debris field is thicker than the charts predicted. It's a maze. Nav computer is struggling to plot a clean path, then plot a dirty one. I grunted, leaning forward in my command chair. The chair, salvaged from a derelict frigate, was patched with synth leather and smelled faintly of ozone. "Just don't scratch the paint." She shot me a sideways glance, a hint of a smile touching her lips. What paint? The first wreck drifted into view, a ghost in the purple haze. It was one of ours. "Tall," A destroyer, HFY. Its spine snapped in half. The two sections joined by a frozen umbilical of tangled conduits and melted steel. As we passed, our proximity light swept across its hull, revealing the name etched below the bridge Valiant. There was no valor here, only a cold, silent defeat. For hours we navigated the graveyard. Ship after ship appeared and vanished, silent monuments to a forgotten battle. We saw crane cruisers, their insectoid designs looking alien and menacing even in death, their silver hulls pockmarked by plasma fire. We saw our own ships, angular and utilitarian, ripped open to the void, their interiors scoured by explosive decompression. It was a city of the dead, a silent testament to the price of our survival. The story said the crane didn't feel fear, didn't know loss. They were a unified consciousness, a single entity wearing a billion bodies. When one of their ships died, it was like a man losing a fingernail. But when the Valiant died, it took with it 300 souls, 300 stories, 300 futures that were now just fading echoes in the cold. My own parents had been on a ship like the Valiant. They were part of the rear guard during the evacuation of Mars, holding the line so the civilian transports could escape. I was 6 years old, huddled in the belly of a cargo hauler, watching the battle unfold on a grainy view screen. I remembered the flash, the brilliant, silent star that had once been their ship. I didn't cry. I had already learned that tears were a waste of water. Getting something, Lena said, her voice pulling me from the memory. Faint energy signature, dead ahead. It's cycling, low power. Matches the profile of a human dreadnought's distress beacon. The Archangel. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the arms of my chair. Take us in. Slow and steady. Corbin, I want sensor sweeps. Full spectrum. I want to know if a crane so much as farts in our direction. My sensors are barely holding together as it is. He grumbled back. But for you, Elias, I'll listen for the spacebug farts. The wreck of the Archangel was a Titan laid low. It was an old behemoth-class dreadnought, a kilometer-long beast of a ship, built when we still believed that overwhelming firepower could win the war. It was wedged between two massive, crystalline asteroids, its bow crushed and its midsection torn open like a gutted fish. The gash was hundreds of meters long, a gaping wound that exposed decks and corridors to the vacuum. The distress beacon pulsed from somewhere deep within its shattered hull, a faint, rhythmic heartbeat in the vast silence. It was a miracle it was still active after 80 years. That's our girl, I murmured. Prep the boarding team. Lena, find us a stable mooring point, somewhere near that breach. Corbin, I need you to monitor the wreck's structural integrity. The last thing I need is for this tomb to collapse on top of us. My boarding team consisted of me. We were a scavenger crew, not a military unit. My gear was a hodgepodge of old marine armor and custom-built tools. My pulse rifle was older than Lena, but I maintained it with religious devotion. As I suited up in the cramped airlock, the hum of the ship was my only companion. The suit sealed with a familiar hiss, and the HUD flickered to life, displaying my vitals and the external temperature. Cold. Always so damn cold. I ran a diagnostic on the magnetic clamps of my boots and checked the charge on my plasma cutter. Every dive was a risk. A hull breach, an equipment malfunction, a dormant crane security drone, any number of things could kill you. But the real danger wasn't the environment. It was the ghosts. Every wreck was haunted. You'd see things in the flicker of your helmet lamp, a child's toy floating in a zero-G corridor, a data pad frozen on a final message home, the skeletal remains of a crewman still strapped into their chair. You had to learn to look past it, to see the salvage, not the sorrow. Airlock is cycling. Elias. Lena's voice came through my helmet. Calm and professional. I've got you tethered. The mooring clamps are secure, but the Archangel's hull is groaning. Corbin says there are microfractures all over. She's brittle. Understood, I said, my own voice sounding distant and filtered through the suit's comms. I'm not planning on staying for tea. I'm going for the bridge. The codex should be in the primary data vault, just off the command deck. The outer door slid open, revealing the void and the colossal, wounded flank of the dreadnought. The purple light of the nebula cast long, strange shadows across its hull. I engaged my mag boots, and with a heavy clank, I stepped out of the stray dog and onto the skin of the dead titan. It was like walking on the back of a leviathan. The scale was immense, disorienting. I was a flea on a dead god. The tether line played out behind me as I made my way toward the massive breach, my boots clamping and releasing with rhythmic, metallic thuds. The silence was absolute, broken only by my own breathing and the faint crackle of static in my comm. I reached the edge of the gash and peered inside. It was a cross-section of a dead city, twisted girders, severed conduits sparking feebly, and entire decks compressed into layers of metallic ruin. Debris floated in the darkness, a slow-motion storm of metal and ice. I unspooled a secondary tether, hooking it to the jagged lip of the breach before unclipping from the main line connected to the stray dog. I was on my own now. I engaged the thrusters on my suit, a gentle burst that pushed me into the darkness of the wreck. My helmet lamp cut a sharp, white cone through the gloom, illuminating a scene of utter devastation. This had been a main thoroughfare, a grand corridor wide enough to drive a transport through. Now, it was a mangled throat of metal. I pushed off a warped bulkhead, propelling myself deeper into the ship. My destination was the ship's spine, the main access conduit that led to the command tower. The journey was slow and treacherous. I had to cut through sealed blast doors and navigate around fields of floating wreckage. In one of the crew quarters, I found the ghosts I was expecting. The compartment was exposed to the void, its contents flash frozen. A crewman was floating near the ceiling, her arms outstretched as if reaching for something, her face a mask of shock, frozen for 80 years. I paused, my light lingering on her face. Her uniform insignia marked her as an engineering officer. She couldn't have been much older than Lena. I pushed the thought away, turning my attention back to the task at hand. Find the codex. Get out. The ghosts couldn't help us win the war. After an hour of crawling through the guts of the Archangel, I found the main conduit. It was a vertical shaft, its gravlifts dead, filled with a lattice of debris. I began the slow, arduous climb, pulling myself up hand over hand, my boots clamped to the wall. The bridge was near the top of the command tower, and the thought of the codex spurred me on. It was more than just data. It was a key, a weapon, a chance to finally hurt the Crane in a way they would understand, to blind them, to sow chaos in their perfect, silent unity. As I neared the command levels, something changed. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the hull, a sound that my suit's audio sensors picked up and translated into a faint thrumming in my ears. It wasn't the groan of a dying ship. This was different. It was structured, alive. Corbin, you reading this? I whispered into the comm. My heart rate ticking up a notch. I'm picking up a low-frequency resonance. It's not the beacon. There was a pause, filled with the hiss of static. I hear it. Elias, he replied, his voice tight. It's not Crane. It's harmonic, almost like music. It's coming from the bridge. Music. The word felt alien here. Profane. I climbed faster, the hum growing stronger, vibrating in my bones. It was a mournful, cyclical sound, a song of sorrow sung by a machine. I reached the top of the shaft and cut through the final blast door. The bridge of the Archangel was a cavern of broken crystal and dead screens. The front view screen was a shattered spiderweb of armored glass, offering a fractured, kaleidoscopic view of the nebula outside. Emergency lights flickered, casting the scene in a bloody, pulsing red. And in the center of the command deck, sitting in the captain's chair, was a crane, not a soldier. They were the grunts. The 12-foot-tall, chitinous monsters we fought on the ground. This was something else. It was slender, almost graceful, its silver carapace less like armor and more like polished chrome. Its head was elongated, and instead of the savage mandibles of a warrior drone, its face was a smooth, featureless mask. Long, delicate limbs were connected by glowing blue filaments to the ship's main console. The hum was coming from it, from the creature. My rifle was up in an instant, the targeting laser painting a red dot on the crane's smooth head. It didn't move. It didn't react. It just sat there, fused with the dead ship, humming its strange, sorrowful tune. Elias, what is it? What do you see? Lena's voice was sharp with anxiety. I couldn't answer. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing. The crane never boarded our ships unless they were swarming for slaughter. They never sat in our chairs. They never interfaced with our dying technology, and the data vault was on the far side of the bridge, its heavy blast door tantalizingly close. I could ignore the alien, grab the codex, and run. That was the mission. But the humming, it wasn't a threat. It felt like a lament against every instinct, against 2 centuries of ingrained hatred. I lowered my rifle a few inches. The red dot slipped from its head to its chest. The creature's head tilted, a slow, deliberate movement. The featureless mask seemed to be looking right at me. And then a voice echoed in my helmet, not through the comm, but directly in my mind. It was a chorus of whisper, 1,000 voices speaking as one, yet clear as a single bell. It was cold and ancient, and filled with a weariness that felt as old as the stars. Whisper Diver, it said. We have been waiting. The humming intensified, and the shattered view screen behind the crane flickered. An image began to form, not of the nebula outside, but of something else. It was a memory. I saw a sky of brilliant blue, a color I'd only ever seen in old recordings. I saw oceans so vast they dwarfed the gas giants of the outer systems. I saw cities of gleaming white, towers that pierced the clouds. It was Earth, not the blackened cinder of our stories, but Earth as it was, Earth in its prime. And then I saw the silver ships descend, a rain of steel from a clear sky, and the image dissolved into fire. The voice in my head spoke again, the sorrow in it so profound it was a physical weight. We did not begin this war, we were sent to end one. Yours. My hand tightened on the rifle. It was a trick, a crane mind game designed to confuse, to incapacitate. They were liars, butchers who had murdered a world, but the image of audio made the sorrow in that voice. It felt real. The data vault was still there. The codex, the key to our victory, was just meters away, but in front of me was a question, an impossibility that challenged the very foundation of our long, bloody war. The mission was to get the codex. But my gut, the part of me that had survived countless dives into the ghosts of the past, was screaming that the real salvage, The real discovery processor was sitting in the captain's chair, humming a song for a world it had helped kill. The choice was simple: the mission or the truth. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that they could not both survive. The word was a lie. My rifle came back up, the red dot a burning star on the alien's smooth, silver face. 2 centuries of hatred, a legacy of survival paid for in blood and bone, screamed in my veins. Lies, I snarled, the sound a ragged burst of static inside my own helmet. You're butchers. You burned my world and you murdered my people. My finger tightened on the trigger. The temptation to end this impossible conversation, a physical ache in my hand. If I fired, the mission parameters were simple: grab the codex, get out. The story would be clean. I found a crane on the bridge, a new variant, and I neutralized it. No one would ever have to know about the voice in my head or the ghost of a blue sky it had shown me. The butcher does not mourn the slaughter. The chorus of whispers replied, and the sorrow in it was a cold, sharp thing that pierced through my rage. Look closer. Elias Thorne. Look at the world you lost. Look at the world we found. The red emergency lights on the bridge pulsed, and in the rhythm of their flashes, the mental projection returned. Stronger this time, more vivid. I was no longer on the bridge of the Archangel. I was standing on a precipice, looking down at a city that sprawled to a hazy horizon. It was a human city, its architecture a chaotic mix of gleaming spires and grimy, overcrowded arcologies. The air was thick with a yellow smog, and the sky was a sickly, bruised orange, not the vibrant blue from the first vision. I could feel the grit in the air, taste the chemical tang on my tongue. Armored vehicles, flying flags I didn't recognize, patrolled the streets below, their cannons swiveling to watch the crowds. This wasn't the paradise of our legends. This was a world choking on its own rage. What is this another trick, I demanded, but my voice was a ghost. Unheard in this phantom world, my body was still on the bridge, rifle raised, but my mind was a captive audience. This is Earth. The Weaver's voice echoed, not with sorrow now, but with the cold finality of a judge. In the final cycle before our arrival, you were not a unified people reaching for the stars. You were a species in its death throes. Your world was dying, and you were accelerating the process, fighting over the scraps of a broken paradise. The scene shifted. I was in orbit, looking down at the planet. Great. Brown scars wept into the oceans from continents that looked diseased. The polar ice caps were gone, and the coastlines of the land masses were flooded. The shapes all wrong. But that wasn't the horror. The horror was the web of orbital platforms, bristling with weapons that made the Archangel's cannons look like toys. Fleets of human ships, painted in the livery of warring corporate states and nationalist factions, faced off against each other in the void. A silent, deadly ballet of mutually assured destruction. You were creating weapons that could fracture reality itself, the Weaver explained. As a vision of a test firing flashed in my mind, a beam of pure chaos that didn't just explode, but erased a section of the moon, leaving a wound of shimmering, unstable space-time in its wake. You were a contagion about to break containment, a threat not just to yourselves, but to the galactic ecosystem. We were the cure. A cure. The words ripped from my throat. A raw, strangled sound. You called genocide a cure. Back on the bridge. The physical strain of the projection was taking its toll. My head was pounding, a spike of ice being driven between my eyes. My suit's biomonitors flashed a warning. Elias, talk to me. Lena's voice was a lifeline, pulling me back from the precipice of the vision. Corbin, seeing a massive energy surge from your position. It's not hostile. It's symbiotic. It's interfacing with your suit's comms. Get out of there. Stand by. Lena, I managed to say. My teeth gritted. I forced my focus back to the silver creature in the captain's chair. Its connection to the console flickered, the blue filaments of light pulsing in time with the thrumming that still vibrated through the deck. It was weak. This was costing it. 2. If you're a cure, then what are you doing here? In one of our ships, mourning your work? This vessel, the Archangel, it saw the truth. The Weaver whispered, the projection fading, leaving me blinking in the pulsing red light of the bridge. Your captain, Ava Rostova. She did not see a weapon in the data you seek. She saw a mirror. She saw our origin. It gestured with one of its slender limbs toward the sealed blast door of the data vault. The Resonance Codex is not a key to our communications. It is a key to our history, a record of our own genesis, a warning. My mind reeled. The fleet's most sought-after prize, the weapon that was supposed to be our salvation, was a history lesson. It was absurd. It had to be another lie. Open it, I commanded, my rifle steady again. Prove it. The Weaver's head tilted. The vault is shielded. My connection to this ship is tenuous. I do not have the strength, but you do. Elias Thorne. The access codes are in the captain's logs, her final entries. I hesitated, then slowly lowered my weapon and moved toward the captain's console, a smaller terminal near the command chair. The screen was dark, but as I approached, it flickered to life, bathing my visor in a soft blue glow. Lines of text scrolled by, the final logs of Captain Eva Rostova, entered in the last hours of the battle 80 years ago. Most of it was battle telemetry, damage reports, casualty lists, standard stuff. But the final entries were different. They were password protected, but the Weaver seemed to whisper the sequence into my mind. The files opened. They weren't reports. They were personal logs, a frantic stream of consciousness. Rostova had found something. A deep space probe had stumbled upon a derelict crane vessel, ancient and dead, and the Archangel had been sent to investigate. They had retrieved its data core, the Codex. Her science teams had spent weeks trying to decipher it. They thought it was a key to the hive mind. But as they translated the resonant frequencies, they didn't find tactical data. They found a story. It's not a network. Rostova's final entry read, the text stark against the blue screen. It's a chorus, a single consciousness born from a species that almost annihilated itself, just like us. They merged, gave up their individuality to end their wars, to survive. They became the crane. The data core isn't a weapon, it's their memory, their original sin. They saw us, our wars, our self-destruction, and they saw a reflection of themselves. They weren't destroying a rival, they were trying to erase a memory of their own past. My blood ran cold. The implications were staggering. We weren't fighting a race of unfeeling monsters. We were fighting a race of traumatized survivors, so terrified of their own history that they would eradicate any species that reminded them of it. The crane weren't conquerors. They were ghosts, haunted by the specter of their own near extinction. Elias, the Archangel's integrity is failing, Corbin's voice crackled, sharp with urgency. Whatever you're doing, do it now. The stern section is starting to shear off. I looked from the console to the vault door. The code was there. In Rostova's log. A simple sequence. I moved to the keypad next to the thick blast door, my movements feeling slow, detached, as if I were moving through water. I punched in the code. There was a heavy clank, the hiss of equalizing pressure, and the meter-thick door slid open with a low groan. The data vault was a small, shielded chamber. In the center, suspended in a stasis field, was a crystalline lattice, glowing with a soft, internal light. It pulsed in time with the Weaver's humming, a silent, harmonic duet, the resonance codex. It was beautiful, and it was the most dangerous thing in the universe. Take it, the Weaver's voice whispered, weaker now, strained. Show them. The truth must be the new weapon. The cycle must be broken. I stepped into the vault, my mag boots clanking on the deck. I could feel the energy coming off the codex, a strange, calming vibration that resonated deep in my bones. Here it was, the culmination of an 80-year-old ghost story, the thing Command had sent us to find. But they wanted a sword, and I had found a confession. I reached out, my gauntleted fingers closing around the containment field. The moment I touched it, a final, powerful vision flooded my mind. It was from the Weaver's perspective. I saw the battle, not as a human, but as part of the Crane consciousness. I felt the cold, dispassionate logic as their ships cut through the Third Fleet. But then, I felt something new, a flicker of dissonance. A single Crane ship, this one, damaged and cut off from the hive mind during the fight. As it died, isolated in the nebula, something strange happened. The single drone aboard, this Weaver, began to process the Archangel's telemetry, its logs, its dying screams, alone for the first time in its existence, surrounded by the echoes of a species it had been sent to destroy. It began to change. It had spent 80 years in the silence of this tomb, piecing together the memories of its enemies, and in doing so, had developed something akin to an individual consciousness, an identity forged in solitude and regret. It wasn't just a Crane anymore. It was a witness. The vision faded. I was back in the vault, holding the codex. The humming from the bridge had stopped. The silence that replaced it was heavy, absolute. I turned. The Weaver was slumped in the captain's chair, the blue filaments connecting it to the console now dark and lifeless. Its silver carapace seemed duller, the light gone from it. Whether it was dead or dormant, I didn't know. It had given me the last of its strength. I secured the codex to my hip, the crystal warm against my suit. The truth, the mission was complete, but the war in my head was just beginning. Lena. Corbin, I said, my voice hoarse. I have it. Prep for immediate departure. I'm coming home. I walked out of the data vault, leaving the silent Weaver on its lonely throne. As I passed the captain's console, I paused, looking at Rostova's final, desperate words on the screen. She had understood, and for that, they had killed her and her entire fleet. The diaspora had spent 2 centuries fueled by a simple, righteous story. We were the innocent victims, and they were the evil destroyers. Our entire culture, our military, our reason for existing was built on that foundation of hatred. But the codex in my hand, the truth humming in my bones, said our story was a lie. We weren't just the victims. We were the catalyst. As I propelled myself back through the mangled guts of the Archangel, the ghosts of its crew seemed to watch me pass. I had come here to salvage a weapon for our war. Instead, I was leaving with a truth that could either save us or tear the last remnants of humanity apart. And I had no idea which. The journey back to the stray dog was a frantic, desperate scramble. The Archangel was dying its final death. The groans of stressed metal, now punctuated by the shriek of rupturing decks and the explosive pop of failing systems, micro-fractures spider-webbed across bulkheads, and entire corridors threatened to collapse into the void. My helmet lamp cut a frantic path through the chaos, illuminating a maelstrom of debris where once there had been order. I moved on pure instinct, my mind a maelstrom of its own, the Weaver's revelations and Rostova's last words churning with 2 centuries of ingrained doctrine. The Codex was a heavy, warm weight on my hip, a physical anchor for the truth that was threatening to pull me under. I felt like a heretic carrying a forbidden gospel, a text that could unravel the very fabric of our society. We weren't just survivors, we were a mirror, and the crane had tried to shatter it. Elias, hurry! Lena's voice was a tight wire of stress in my comms. The mooring clamps are failing. We're getting pulled in by the wreck's structural collapse. I saw the familiar, battered shape of the stray dog through a newly opened fissure in the hull, its docking lights a beacon of safety in the swirling chaos. I was close. I fired my thruster, a reckless burst that sent me careening through a cloud of frozen shrapnel, the impacts pinging off my armor like angry hornets. I reached the outer hull just as the main tether snapped with a percussive thud that I felt through the soles of my boots. I was adrift. For a heart-stopping second, I tumbled end over end, the purple nebula and the dying dreadnought spinning in a dizzying dance. Got you! Lena's voice was a gasp of relief as a magnetic grapple shot out from the stray dog, clamping onto my suit's backplate with a jolt that rattled my teeth. She reeled me in like a deep-sea catch, the ship's engines straining to pull away from the Archangel's gravitational death hug. The moment my boots hit the airlock deck, the outer door slammed shut and the cycling sequence began. I ripped my helmet off before the process was even complete, the air hissing into the chamber, cold and tasting of recycled metal. I leaned against the bulkhead, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the Codex pressing into my side. The ship gave a final, violent lurch as Lena gunned the engines, herring us free from the collapsing wreck. Through the thick porthole, I watched the Archangel, the tomb of the Third Fleet, and the Silent Weaver finally break apart, its massive spine snapping in a slow, silent cataclysm. It vanished into the purple haze of the Seraphim clutch, taking its secrets with it, all but one. Lena and Corbin were waiting for me on the other side of the inner airlock door. Their faces were a mixture of relief and anxious curiosity. Lena's eyes immediately went to the glowing crystal lattice attached to my hip. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Codex I nodded, pushing myself off the wall. My legs felt unsteady. "That's it." Corbin's gaze was more analytical. His eyes narrowed as he scanned my suit, my vitals on his datapad. "You were in there a long time, Elias. And that energy reading. It wasn't just the beacon. What happened?" I looked at their faces. Lena, so young. Her entire life defined by this war. Her belief in our cause as pure and unshakable as a laser. Corbin, older, more cynical, but still a man who had lost everything to the crane and would see them burn for it. How could I tell them? How could I explain that the monsters of our nightmares were just as haunted as we were, that the foundation of our 200-year crusade was built on a lie of omission? "Let's get to the bridge," I said, my voice flat. "And someone get me a drink. A real one." The bridge was quiet as we slipped out of the nebula, leaving the ghost ships and their dead behind. Corbin poured me a glass of amber liquid, a passable synth ale he brewed in a makeshift still near the engine core. The fiery warmth did little to chase away the cold that had settled deep in my bones. I placed the Codex on the central console, its soft light pulsing, casting strange, shifting patterns on the faces of my crew. The mission was a success. I began, the words feeling hollow, rehearsed. This is the Resonance Codex, but it's not what we thought it was. I told them everything. I told them about the Weaver, the living crane fused to the Archangel's throne. I told them about the visions, the images of a dying, self-destructive Earth. I relayed Rostovah's final logs, her discovery that the crane were not just alien invaders, but cosmic censors, a species of traumatized survivors so terrified of their own past, they would commit genocide to prevent it from being repeated. I explained that the Codex wasn't a weapon to control their hive mind, but their collective memory, their history, their shame. When I finished, the silence on the bridge was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the ship's life support. Lena was staring at the Codex, her face pale, her expression a battleground of disbelief and dawning horror. Corbin was leaning against a bulkhead, his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask of stone. "So you're saying," Corbin finally said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "that the crane were justified, that they had a right to burn Earth, that the billions they slaughtered were just a cosmic cleanup job?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "Of course not. It was genocide. It was a monstrous act. But it wasn't born from malice. It was born from fear. Their fear of becoming us. Again, fear." Lena's voice was sharp, brittle. "They pilot ships that can crack planets. They command armies that have pushed us to the brink of extinction for 200 years. And you're telling me they're afraid?" She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not just confusion in her eyes, but a flicker of betrayal. I was her commander, the veteran whisper diver who knew the score, who understood the enemy. And I was telling her that the enemy, the boogeyman of her entire existence, was a victim. It changes everything. "Lena," I said softly. "No, it doesn't." Corbin cut in, pushing himself off the wall. He walked over to the Codex, his hand hovering over its glowing surface. But he didn't touch it. "It changes the why. It doesn't change the what. They still killed our ancestors. They still hunt us across the galaxy. This sob story, it doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't rebuild our homes. All it does is give us a reason. And frankly, I don't give a damn about their reasons." He was right, in a way. The dead were still dead. The war was still real. But he was also wrong. The why was everything. We had been fighting a force of nature, an implacable alien evil. But if they had a reason, if they had a history, a fear, that meant they could be reasoned with. It meant there could be an end to the war that wasn't just the total annihilation of one side. Command won't see it that way, I said, voicing the thought that had been gnawing at me since I left the Archangel. We hand this over, and they'll see a history, a weakness. They won't see a chance for peace. They'll see a target. They'll try to weaponize their trauma, use their history against them. It'll just be a new kind of bomb. Lena looked up from the Codex, her eyes meeting mine. The conflict in them was raw. So what do? We lie. We tell them the Codex is a dud, that we found nothing. The thought was tempting. We could erase the tape, jettison the Codex into a star, and pretend the Weaver and its story never existed. We could go back to the simple, clean narrative of us versus them. It would be easier, but it would be a lie. And we would be condemning both our species to an endless cycle of violence, fueled by a misunderstanding. No, I said, the decision solidifying in my mind. We can't lie, but we can't give this to the Fleet Command. Not yet. Corbin raised an eyebrow. And who do we give it to? You have a direct line to someone who isn't a war hawk general who dreams of glassing crane worlds. Maybe, I said, an idea, a dangerous, desperate idea, beginning to form. There's a place, an outpost in the Shadow Belt. It's not on any official fleet charts. It's a haven for dissenters, scientists, philosophers, historians, people who were exiled or went into hiding because they started asking the wrong questions about the war, about the official history of Earth. They call it the Athenaeum. Lena's eyes widened. The Athenaeum is a myth. Elias. A story they tell rookies to scare them into following orders. Don't question the cause, or you'll end up with the Ghost Fleet in the Shadow Belt. It's real, I said. I've heard whispers about it for years. I even have a set of potential coordinates, gleaned from a data crier on Erebus a decade ago. It's a long shot. The coordinates could be a decoy, or the place could have been abandoned for years. But if anyone can understand what this codex really means, it's them. Corbin let out a short, harsh laugh. So, that's the plan. We go AWOL, betray Fleet Command, and chase a ghost story across the most dangerous, uncharted asteroid belt in the sector. All based on a crane's deathbed confession and a rumor you heard in a bar. He gestured around the cramped bridge of the stray dog. In this ship, she barely held together getting through the nebula. A run through the Shadow Belt will tear her apart. You can keep her together, Corbin, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. You always do. I looked between them, my crew, my family. I was asking them to throw away their lives, to become traitors, to risk everything on my gut feeling. This is not in order, I said quietly. You both have a choice. We can set a course for the nearest fleet base, hand over the codex, collect our pay, and let the admirals decide the fate of humanity. Or you can come with me, and we can try to find a different future. Your call. Lena was the first to speak. She looked from my face to the glowing codex, and a flicker of her old fire, the spark I thought I had extinguished, returned to her eyes. I didn't sign up to fight a war based on a lie, she said, her voice firm. I'm with you, Elias. Take us to the Athenaeum. We both looked at Corbin. He stood there for a long time, his expression grim, his gaze fixed on the crystal. He was a pragmatist, a man who believed in systems and mechanics, not hope and ghost stories. He reached out and, for the first time, gently touched the codex. He didn't flinch. 200 years, he said, his voice a low rasp. 200 years of running, fighting, dying, all because we reminded them of a mistake they made 1,000,000 years ago. He pulled his hand back and looked at me, a bitter, weary resignation in his eyes. Fine, he sighed, running a hand through his greasy hair. But if we get torn to shreds by asteroids and crane patrols, I'm blaming you. And there'd better be real ale at this mythical library of yours. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Plot a course. Lena, I said, a grim smile touching my lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. To the Shadow Belt. Let's go hunting for some ghosts. As the stray dog turned its nose away from the civilized space of the diaspora and toward the uncharted darkness, the codex on the console seemed to pulse with a steady, hopeful light. We were traitors now, fugitives with a stolen truth. We were 3 souls on a broken ship, chasing a myth. But for the first time in a very long time, we weren't just fighting to survive. We were fighting for a chance to live. The Shadow Belt lived up to its name. It was a place the light forgot, a sprawling, chaotic wound in space where asteroids, ranging from the size of a fist to the size of a small moon, tumbled in a thick, unpredictable swarm. Navigation wasn't a science here. It was an art form, a terrifying dance between Lena's skill and the ship's groaning protests. For 3 weeks, we lived on the edge of a razor. The stray dog became our universe, a tiny bubble of life in a maelstrom of dead rock and ice. The constant tension was a physical presence on the bridge, a fourth crew member with a cold, heavy touch. Every shudder of the hull, every proximity alarm is high and sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through our veins. Corbin lived in the engine room, a wraith covered in grease and fueled by caffeine and spite, coaxing the ship's battered systems through maneuvers that should have torn them apart. He rerouted power, patched failing conduits with literal tape and sealant, and cursed my name, Lena's name, and the name of every engineer who had ever laid a hand on the ship before him. Yet, she flew. Lena was a rock, her focus absolute. She spent 18-hour shifts at the helm, her eyes glued to the view screen and the swirling mess of the nav computer's projections. The asteroids were a constant, silent threat, but they weren't the only one. The Shadow Belt was also a hiding place for pirates, smugglers, and Crane scout patrols that used the debris for cover. We ran silent, our energy signature dampened to a whisper. Every system not essential for life support or navigation powered down. The bridge was perpetually cold, our breath misting in the dim light of the consoles. During the long, quiet watches, the Codex was our constant companion. It sat on the central console, its soft, internal light a steady, calming presence in the gloom. Its gentle thrumming had become part of the ship's background noise, a low, harmonic hum that I could feel in my teeth. Sometimes, when I was alone on the bridge in the dead of the long shift, I would place my hand on its smooth, warm surface. When I did, I would feel something, not a vision, not a voice, but a feeling, a deep, ancient sense of weariness, of a peace that had been bought at an unimaginable price, the peace of a billion voices silenced into one. The truth of the Codex had settled differently on each of us. For Lena, it had shattered a foundation but replaced it with a fierce new purpose. She saw the possibility of a future that wasn't drenched in blood. She clung to it with the tenacity of a drowning sailor. She devoured Rostova's logs, cross-referencing them with historical data from our ship's limited library, trying to find corroboration, trying to understand the Earth the Crane had found. For Corbin, the revelation had curdled, not into hope, but into a deeper, more profound bitterness. He accepted the truth of it. The logic was cold and hard, and Corbin understood logic, but he couldn't forgive it. So we were a rabid dog, he said to me one shift, his voice raspy over the comm from the engine room. And they put us down. You don't thank the man who shoots your dog, Elias. Even if the dog was sick, he saw the Athenaeum not as a sanctuary of hope, but as our only option. The last desperate move in a game we had already lost. As for me, I was adrift between their two poles. The rage that had fueled me for my entire life was gone, hollowed out, leaving a vast, empty space. I had defined myself by my enemy, and my enemy was not what I thought. I was a hunter without a monster to hunt, a soldier without a righteous war to fight. I looked at the Codex and saw the path to a different future, but the ghosts of my past, the phantom limb of a lost Earth, still ached with a pain that hope couldn't soothe. After 23 days of nerve-shredding flight, the coordinates I'd gotten from the data crier on Erebus led us to a dead system, a single, rust-colored gas giant orbited by a handful of barren moons. The star was a dim, dying ember, casting a sickly orange light over everything. There's nothing here, Elias. Lena said, her voice heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. Her console showed no energy signatures, no structures, no signs of life. The coordinates are a bust. Corbin's sigh over the comm was a gust of pure, unfiltered, "I told you so." So we came all this way to die in a forgotten piss stain of a system. Fantastic. The ale better have been worth it. Defeat felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I had gambled everything on a ghost story, and it had led us to this empty grave. I stared at the main moon on the view screen, a pockmarked sphere of gray rock. It was exactly as the coordinates had indicated. It had to be here. "Scan the moon again," I said, my voice tight. "Full spectrum. I want to know the composition of every grain of dust on that rock." Lena complied, her fingers moving tiredly over the console. The process was slow. I watched the scan data crawl across the screen, a stream of geological gibberish, and then I saw it. A flicker, an anomaly. "There," I said, pointing a trembling finger at a line of code. "That gravitational reading. It's too high for a moon of this density. It's artificial." Corbin's voice crackled. He's right. The core is generating a focused gravitic field. It's subtle, designed to mimic a natural body. But it's there. They're hiding inside the moon. Hope, sharp and painful, flared in my chest. Lena's hands flew across her console, refining the scans, peeling back the layers of the phantom moon. An image began to resolve. A wireframe ghost within the ghost. It was a station, a massive one, kilometers in diameter, built into a hollowed-out cavern in the moon's core. Its outer hull was masked by a holographic projection and layered with asteroid debris, making it invisible to all but the most focused deep scan. "They're hailing us," Lena said, her voice filled with awe. "Standard diaspora civilian code, but they're asking for a password." I remembered the data crier, a withered old man with eyes that had seen too much. He'd given me the coordinates, but he'd also given me something else, a phrase he'd called an old Earth proverb, a key. "Tell them. A single candle can light 1,000 more," I said. There was a pause. Then, a section of the moon's gray, cratered surface shimmered and dissolved, revealing the metallic gleam of a docking bay door. A soft green light pulsed from within, a silent invitation. "Welcome to the Athenaeum," a calm, female voice said over our comms. Docking the stray dog inside the moon was like guiding a wounded bird into a cathedral. The interior of the station was a breathtaking sight. The central cavern was a vast open space, kilometers high, filled with a soft, warm light that mimicked a sun. A forest of biodomes, lush with green vegetation real. Living trees and plants clung to the inner walls, connected by a web of delicate bridges. In the center of the cavern, floating in zero gravity, was a cluster of structures that looked like a scholar's dream libraries with physical books, laboratories humming with quiet energy, and communal plazas where people walked and talked with an ease I hadn't seen in my entire life. They weren't soldiers. They were academics, artists, engineers, thinkers, the exiles, the ghosts. We were met at the docking bay by a woman named Eris Thorne. The shared surname was a coincidence, a ghost of an old world. But the irony was not lost on me. She was old, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent, missing the hunted look that everyone in the fleet wore. She was the Athenaeum's curator. She led us through the station, past hydroponic farms and workshops where people were building things that weren't weapons. The air was clean, filled with the scent of soil and growing things. It was so different from the sterile, recycled air of fleet stations that it made me dizzy. We were a spectacle, 3 armed and armored figures, reeking of the war and the void, walking through their peaceful sanctuary. People stopped and stared, their expressions a mix of curiosity and old, deep-seated fear. They had left the war behind, and we had just brought it to their doorstep. In her office, a warm room lined with shelves of actual paper-bound books, we presented the codex. I told our story again, but this time, it felt different. Telling it to Lena and Corbin had been a confession. Telling it to Eris felt like a plea. She listened patiently, her fingers steepled, her sharp eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the gently pulsing crystal on her desk. For 80 years, she said finally, her voice soft but resonant. The fleet has been searching for a sword. You, Elias Thorne, are the first to come back with a shield. She stood and walked to a large viewport that overlooked the central cavern. We have always known the official history was incomplete, she said. Her back to us, we found fragments, inconsistencies in the data from before the Exodus, whispers of civil wars, of ecological collapse. We theorized that humanity was not the innocent victim of the official narrative, but we never had proof. This, she gestured to the codex. This changes the equation. What do we do with it? Lena asked, her voice full of a hope that made my heart ache. Do we send it to the fleet? Can you make them listen? Eris turned, and the look on her face was one of profound sadness. The fleet is an engine of war, child. It runs on hatred and fear. You cannot feed it truth and expect it to produce peace. It will only find a way to turn that truth into a more efficient weapon. They will see the Crane's trauma not as a bridge, but as a vulnerability to be exploited, and she was confirming my own worst fears. The Athenaeum was a sanctuary, not a fortress. They had no fleet, no army. All they had were ideas. So we're trapped, Corbin said, the bitterness back in his voice. We have the one thing that could end the war, and we can't use it. Perhaps not in the way you think, Eris said. She looked at me, her eyes seeming to pierce right through me, seeing the hollow space where my rage used to be. The Crane are not a monolith. Elias, you proved that. The Weaver on the Archangel, it became an individual. It learned. It changed. If one can change, so can others. This codex is not a message for our admirals. It is a message for them. My mind raced, grasping the terrifying, audacious scope of her idea. You want to broadcast it to send their own history back to them, not as an attack, she said quickly, but as an offering, a gesture of understanding. We must show them that we are not the reflection of their violent past they so fear. We must show them that we have learned, that we have changed. We must hold up this mirror and show them that we see them for what they are, survivors, just like us. It was insane. It was beautiful. It was the only path forward that wasn't paved with more death. But the Crane hive mind was a fortress of psychic silence. How could we possibly get a message through? There is a way, Eris said, as if reading my thoughts. A legend, even among us. A place where the veil between realities is thin. The Crane call it the node. We call it the heart of silence. It is the central hub of their entire consciousness. A place not in physical space, but elsewhere. And we think we know how to open a door. She looked at the 3 of us, the broken crew of a broken ship, and offered us an impossible choice. The fleet will be hunting you. They will want the codex. But if you are willing, your journey is not over. We can give you the coordinates. We can give you the key. But you will have to fly into the heart of the hive mind itself and deliver this message. You will have to show them the candle. The key was a song, not a password or a piece of technology, but a complex series of resonant frequencies that Eris and her linguists had painstakingly reverse-engineered from fragments of crane transmissions and the subtle harmonics of the codex itself. It was a sequence designed not to break a lock, but to harmonize with it, to convince the crane consciousness that the signal was not an intrusion, but a part of itself, a long-lost memory returning home. The Athenaeum gave us everything they could. They repaired and refitted the stray dog, their engineers working alongside Corbin, replacing his patchwork fixes with elegant, efficient systems that made him weep with a joy I never thought I'd see. They restocked our supplies, gave us new sensor masking technology, and armed us with non-lethal defensive measures drones that could project false energy signatures, torpedoes that erupted in blinding sensor-jamming chaff. We were no longer a warship. We were a message in a bottle, designed to slip through the net, not tear it. Leaving the Athenaeum was like stepping out of a dream. The peace and vibrant life of the station felt a universe away from the cold, hard reality of the war we were flying back into. The fleet had already declared us traitors. Bounties had been placed on our heads, our faces plastered on wanted list at every major outpost. We were fugitives from the very people we were trying to save. Lena, Corbin, and I had become a tighter unit than ever before, bound by the sheer, terrifying audacity of our mission. Lena piloted with a newfound serenity, her fear replaced by a quiet, determined focus. Corbin, for all his cynicism, and worked with a feverish devotion, shutting the stray dog not as a heap of junk, but as a sacred vessel. As for me, the emptiness inside had been filled, not with the old, familiar rage, but with a fragile, terrifying hope. I was no longer just running from the ghosts of the past. I was flying toward a future that was utterly unknown. The coordinates Eris had given us led us to the galactic core, a region of space known as the Cauldron, where stellar density was high and the fabric of space-time was warped and unstable. It was a place sane pilots avoided. According to the Athenaeum's research, the crane's central node wasn't a physical object, but a singularity, a place where their collective consciousness was anchored to our reality. To reach it, we had to navigate a labyrinth of gravitational tides and radiation storms that made the shadow belt look like a pleasure cruise. As we drew closer, we began to see them. Crane fleets, not scout patrols, but massive armadas. Their silver, insectoid ships moving in silent, perfect formations. They were guarding this place, their holy of holies. We ran deeper and colder than ever before, a ghost slipping through the pickets of a silent, vigilant army. The tension on the bridge was so thick I could taste it, a metallic tang of fear and recycled air. Days turned into a week of silent, nerve-shredding running. We dodged patrols, weathered gravitic shears that threatened to peel our hull like a fruit, and navigated by the light of dying stars. And then we found it. It wasn't a planet or a station. It was a hole in the universe, a sphere of absolute perfect blackness that did not reflect light, but consumed it. It was surrounded by a shimmering corona of fractured light. The captured ghosts of stars and nebulae bent and twisted around its event horizon. This was the heart of silence. The crane node. My God, Lena whispered, her hands frozen on the control yoke. Corbin, what are your readings? Nothing, he replied, his voice a choked gasp. And everything. The singularity is tearing my sensors apart. But the space around it, it's humming. The frequency is off the charts. It's the hive mind. Elias, we're hearing their thoughts. It was a psychic roar, A billion voices screaming in a chorus of perfect silent unity, even without the Weaver's direct touch. I could feel the pressure of it against my mind, a terrifying weight of pure, undiluted consciousness. This was what we had to break through. Iris said the key needs to be broadcast on a carrier wave of pure energy. I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. We have to fly into that corona. It's the only way the signal will be strong enough to pierce the singularity's interference. Fly into that. Corbin's voice was incredulous. The tidal forces will shred us into our component atoms. The Athenaeum's engineers accounted for that, Lena said, her focus returning. She pointed to a new console. They installed a resonant gravitic dampener. In theory, it should harmonize with the singularity's tidal forces and create a stable pocket for us to enter. In theory. I'm getting real tired of theories, Corbin muttered. But I could hear him working, rerouting power, priming the new system. We had come too far to turn back. I took the codex from the central console. It felt warm, alive, its internal light pulsing with a frantic, eager rhythm. This was its purpose. This was its homecoming. Take us in. Lena, I said. The stray dog plunged toward the shimmering corona. The ship screamed. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. And the hull groaned a symphony of tortured metal. I was thrown against my restraints as the gravitic forces seized us. A giant, invisible fist crushing us from all sides. Dampener is at 120% capacity, Corbin yelled over the din. She's not gonna hold. Through the bucking view screen, I saw the fractured light of the corona wash over us. The psychic roar in my head intensified, becoming a physical blow, a wave of pure thought that threatened to shatter my sanity. It was a storm of cold logic, of unified purpose, of absolute certainty in its mission to cleanse the galaxy of the chaotic plague of individuality. I slammed the codex into the broadcast amplifier and screamed, now. Lena sent in the song. Lena's fingers flew. And the key, the harmonic message of peace, erupted from our ship. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. A wave of pure, resonant harmony that cut through the psychic chaos of the hive mind. For a moment, everything stopped. The ship stopped shaking. The alarms fell silent. The crushing weight on my mind vanished, and the psychic roar of the crane was replaced by a single, unified emotion, broadcast with the force of a supernova surprise. Then came the pain. Not our pain, theirs. As the codex broadcast their own forgotten history, the story of their civil wars, their self-destruction, their desperate unification into the heart of their consciousness, the hive mind recoiled in agony. It was the pain of a phantom limb, the agony of a buried trauma violently unearthed. The corona around the singularity flickered, and the crane fleets guarding it faltered, their perfect formations breaking as a wave of confusion and remembered sorrow washed through them. But the silence was broken. From the depths of the black singularity, nothing new emerged. A single, powerful consciousness, ancient and vast, and the core of the hive mind. That wasn't a chorus of whispers like the Weaver, was a singular, feigned voice that spoke not of sorrow, but of cold, righteous fury. Heretics, boomed in my mind, voice that was not a sound but a fundamental law of the universe. You bring us the poison of memory, the plague of self. We are unity. We are peace. The past must remain dead. The corona around us began to collapse, the stable pocket Lena had found dissolving. The crane fleets, recovering from the initial shock, their confusion replaced by the cold command of their core intelligence, began to turn toward us. Their weapon ports slid open. It didn't work. Corbin gasped, his face ashen. We just made it angry. No, I said, looking at the codec, which was now glowing with the fierce, white-hot intensity of a star. It was still broadcasting, fighting against the overwhelming will of the Crane's core. The Weaver's message, Rostova's discovery. Aris's hope. It was all in that signal. A single candle. It's not over, I said. I placed my hands on the codex, closing my eyes, and did the only thing I had left to do. I added my own voice to the song. I didn't send logic or history. I sent them my pain. I sent them the memory of a 6-year-old boy watching his parents' ship die. I sent them the cold of the void, the ache of exile, the faces of every friend I had lost. I sent them the rage on Chrysis, the hatred, the 2 centuries of our suffering. And then I sent them the moment on the Archangel's bridge. I sent them the Weaver's sorrow. I sent them the shared, shocking recognition that we were the same. We are not your past. I screamed into the storm of thought, not with words, but with pure, raw emotion. We are your second chance. Do not make the same mistake twice. For a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity, my consciousness was joined with the Crane. I felt their ancient fear, their rigid certainty, and the tiny radical seed of doubt the Codex had planted. I saw our 2 species, locked in a death spiral, 2 ghosts trying to kill their own reflection. Then, the connection snapped. The ship gave a final, violent lurch, and Lena, with a cry of triumph, gunned the engines, pulling us free from the collapsing corona, just as a wave of plasma fire from the Crane fleet erupted where we had been moments before. We were alive. We were flying away from the heart of silence, the song of the Codex finally fading into silence behind us. We didn't know if we had succeeded. The Crane fleets did not pursue us. They simply held their position, a silent, waiting armada. The war wasn't over. There was no sudden, miraculous ceasefire. We had not slain the monster. We had simply shown it its own reflection. Maybe that was enough. As we limped back toward the Athenaeum, a broken ship with a broken crew, the future was a vast, terrifying unknown. The diaspora would still see us as traitors. The fleet would still want to fight. The Crane's core intelligence would still see us as a threat. But we had planted a seed. The truth was loose in their hive mind, a virus of memory that could not be contained. Change, if it came, would be slow, measured in generations, not days. But it was possible. For the first time, it was possible. I looked at my crew. Lena was plotting our course home, a small, weary smile on her face. Corbin was already in the engine room, cursing and cajoling the ship back to life. We were not heroes. We were not saviors. We were just 3 people on a scavenger ship who had dived into the greatest ghost story of all and come back with the truth. We were the whisper that might, one day, end the screaming. The ghost of Earth would always follow us, a scar we would carry forever. But for the first time, it was not the only thing we could see when we looked to the future. Out in the vast, silent dark, a single candle was burning, and it was enough.